The crystalline spires of the Galactic Academy of Xenoscience pierced the purple sky of Centauri Prime, their surfaces reflecting the light of 3 moons. Inside the grand lecture hall, Marcus Drake sat among beings from 100 different worlds, feeling distinctly ordinary in his standard-issue cadet uniform. Unlike his classmates, he possessed no natural armor, no enhanced sensory organs, no auxiliary limbs, just the standard human package of 5 senses and determination. Professor Zelthon, a towering andromedan with shifting plasma-like skin, gestured to the containment field at the center of the hall. Inside, a creature unlike anything Marcus had ever seen moved with liquid grace. Its body seemed to absorb and reflect light simultaneously, creating an effect like oil on water. 6 limbs moved in perfect coordination as it studied its surroundings with eyes that held unmistakable intelligence. "The Luminox," Professor Zelthon announced, his voice resonating through the chamber. "Discovered on the outer rim 6 months ago, every attempt to study or contain it has failed. Its ability to phase through solid matter and manipulate energy fields has made it impossible to hold." The professor's gaze swept across the assembled students. "Your final challenge is simple. Establish meaningful contact with the Luminox. Success will guarantee your position in next year's advanced program." The Vexarian students chittered excitedly, their crystalline bodies humming with electromagnetic energy. The Neuroth representatives expanded their psychic membranes, already preparing to attempt mental contact. Marcus noticed Kira Vorthak, a Centaurian warrior scholar, flexing her biometallic exoskeleton with confidence. As Professor Zelthon deactivated the containment field, the Luminox moved like liquid starlight, disappearing through the nearest wall. The hall erupted into chaos as students rushed to deploy their various abilities and technologies. The Vexarians generated complex energy webs, while the Neuroths broadcast psychic tracking fields. Kira led a team of Centaurians in a methodical search pattern, their enhanced senses scanning for any trace of the creature. Marcus remained in his seat, watching. Where others saw a quarry to be captured, he saw something else in those intelligent eyes: fear, curiosity, and a profound loneliness. The creature wasn't just running from containment, it was searching for something. He pulled out his tablet, accessing the limited data available on the Luminox's discovery. The reports focused on its abilities, its resistance to capture, its potential military applications. But Marcus found himself drawn to a different detail. The creature had been found near the ruins of an ancient space station, alone. As the hours passed, reports of failed attempts filtered back. The Vexarians' energy webs had been turned against them, the Neuroth's psychic probes deflected, and the Centaurians' coordinated efforts had only succeeded in driving the Luminox deeper into the Academy's sprawling complex. Marcus finally stood, but instead of joining the hunt, he walked to the original containment area. He studied the energy readings, the temperature variations, the subtle marks left behind. The Luminox hadn't just been contained here. It had been studying them just as much as they had been studying it. "Interesting approach, Cadet Drake," Professor Zelthon's voice startled him. "While your colleagues chase, you observe." "The Luminox isn't just running, Professor," Marcus replied, not taking his eyes off the data. "It's testing us. Every failed capture attempt teaches it more about our capabilities, but nobody's trying to learn about it in return." The professor's plasma skin rippled with what might have been approval. "And what have you learned?" Marcus pointed to the energy patterns. "It's not just phasing through matter, it's reading and replicating energy signatures. The containment field didn't hold it. It chose to stay until it understood how we operate." He turned to face his teacher. "We're not dealing with a simple escaped specimen. We're dealing with a scared, intelligent being that's trying to figure out if it can trust any of us." A distant crash echoed through the halls, followed by the sound of frustrated shouts. Professor Zelthon's expression remained unreadable, but his skin patterns shifted to a deeper hue. "An interesting theory, Cadet. How would you test it?" Marcus smiled slightly. "By stopping the chase and starting a conversation." He gathered his things, his mind already forming a plan. "After all, Professor, isn't that what humans do best? We may not have the strongest bodies or the most advanced abilities, but we understand what it's like to be underestimated. Sometimes the best way to make contact isn't to reach out with power, but with understanding." As Marcus left the hall, he could feel the professor's gaze following him. He knew his classmates would consider his approach naive, perhaps even foolish. But as another crash echoed through the academy, followed by the distinctive sound of a Vexarian energy web shorting out, he couldn't help but smile. Sometimes the most powerful ability wasn't about what you could do, but about what you chose not to do. The academy's ancient halls echoed with the sounds of frustration as Marcus made his way through the lower levels. Scorch marks from failed energy nets scarred the walls, and the air crackled with residual psychic energy from the Neuroth's attempts at mental contact. He passed several exhausted students, their advanced abilities proving useless against the Luminox's mysterious powers. Marcus reached the Academy's vast library, a cathedral-like space filled with holographic data streams and crystalline memory cores. Here, away from the chaos of the hunt, he could think clearly. He accessed the central database, pulling up everything known about the space station where the Luminox was discovered. The station's ruins dated back millennia, predating even the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the Alliance. As he sifted through the data, patterns emerged. The station's design suggested it was built to study something or someone. The containment systems weren't meant for prisoners, but for protection. The Luminox hadn't been trapped there, it had been living there. A soft chime interrupted his research. His tablet displayed new energy readings. The Luminox was moving again, but not randomly. It was following the Academy's power conduits, using them like highways through the structure. Marcus overlaid the creature's movement patterns with the Academy's layout, and his eyes widened. It wasn't just moving, it was drawing something. "Fascinating discovery, isn't it?" A melodic voice startled him. Val, a Stellarian scholar whose body seemed composed of living starlight, drifted closer. "Though I suspect you're seeing something the others have missed." Marcus nodded, gesturing to his findings. "The Luminox isn't running blindly. Look at its movement pattern, it's replicating the layout of that ancient station. It's trying to recreate something familiar in an unfamiliar place." Nyra's stellar form pulsed with interest. "Yet you haven't joined the hunt. Why?" "Because it's not about catching it," Marcus replied, standing up. "It's about understanding why it's here. The station wasn't its prison, it was its home. And now it's alone in a galaxy it doesn't understand, surrounded by beings trying to capture it." A distant explosion rocked the library, followed by Kira's commanding voice ordering another containment attempt. Nyra's light dimmed slightly. "The Centaurians grow impatient. Their methods become more aggressive." Marcus quickly gathered his research materials. "Which will only make things worse. The Luminox doesn't just phase through matter, it absorbs and reflects energy. The more force they use, the stronger it becomes." He paused, a new thought forming. "And the more afraid it gets." He hurried through the library's vast archives, Nyra floating beside him. "What are you planning, Marcus Drake?" "Something probably stupid," he admitted with a slight smile. "But very human." He reached a quiet corner of the archives, far from the hunt. Here, the power conduits ran deep through the Academy's foundation, their energy a steady pulse in the walls. Marcus sat down, back against the wall, and pulled out his tablet. He began modifying its power signature, adjusting it to match the subtle frequency he detected in the Luminox's movements. "Every species in the Academy has tried to capture it using their greatest strengths," he explained to Nyra. "But sometimes strength isn't what's needed." "And what do humans offer instead?" Nyra asked, her stellar form shifting with curiosity. "Understanding," Marcus replied, fine-tuning the frequency. "And patience." He activated the modified tablet, sending a gentle pulse through the nearby power conduits. Not a trap, not an attempt at containment, just a signal. An echo of the energy pattern from the ancient station. A reminder of home. Minutes passed in silence. Nyra remained nearby, her natural light dimmed to avoid interference. Another explosion echoed from above, but Marcus didn't move. He kept the signal steady, a subtle beacon in the chaos. Then, almost imperceptibly, the wall began to shimmer. The Luminox emerged partially, its form more liquid than solid, its eyes studying Marcus with unmistakable intelligence. It remained half-phased through the wall, ready to disappear at the first sign of threat. Marcus kept perfectly still, maintaining the gentle signal. "Hello," he said softly. "I think I understand now. You're not running from us, you're looking for someone who understands what was lost." The luminox's form rippled, its colors shifting like aurora borealis. It moved slightly closer, drawn by the familiar energy signature. Marcus could feel Naira's tension, her stellar body bright with anticipation. "The station was more than your home," Marcus continued, his voice gentle. "It was built by your people, wasn't it? A place to study other species, to learn about them safely." He gestured to his tablet. "Just like you're studying us now." The creature's eyes fixed on him, and for a moment Marcus felt a connection, not the forceful probe of a Neuroth's psychic touch, but something deeper. Understanding, recognition. The Luminox saw in him something it recognized, curiosity tempered by compassion. A sudden commotion from the upper level shattered the moment. The Luminox vanished instantly, disappearing back into the Academy's power network. But Marcus smiled. He'd seen something in those brief seconds of connection that changed everything. "Remarkable," Naira whispered, her light pulsing with excitement. "You didn't try to contain it, yet you came closer than anyone." Marcus stood, already planning his next move. "Because I offered it a choice. Every other attempt has been about proving superiority, showing that our technology or abilities could overcome its defenses." He gathered his equipment, mind racing with new possibilities. But maybe what it really needs isn't someone to overpower it, but someone to understand it. As they left the archives, Marcus knew the real challenge was just beginning. The other students wouldn't stop their pursuit, and the Luminox was still afraid. But for the first time since the creature's release, he felt hope. Sometimes the greatest discoveries came not from domination, but from connection, and humans, for all their apparent limitations, excelled at exactly that. Darkness had fallen over the Academy, the three moons casting overlapping shadows through the towering windows. Marcus sat cross-legged in one of the abandoned research labs, surrounded by holographic displays showing the Luminox's movement patterns. Naira's stellar form provided gentle illumination as she helped him analyze the data. "The others are growing desperate," she observed, her light flickering with concern. "The Centaurian team has requisitioned experimental containment technology from the weapons lab." Marcus nodded, watching as another energy surge registered on his monitors. The Luminox was moving again, but its patterns had changed. It was no longer exploring or testing, it was defending itself. Each aggressive attempt to capture it only reinforced its fear and determination. "They're missing the point," Marcus said, adjusting his tablet's energy output. "Look at these readings. Every time it absorbs an energy attack, the signature becomes more complex. It's not just reflecting our technology, it's learning from it." A new alert flashed across his screens. The Vexarians had deployed a quantum entanglement net, trying to trap the Luminox between dimensions. Marcus watched as the creature not only escaped, but used the net's own quantum properties to split itself into multiple images, confusing its pursuers even further. "Fascinating," Naira drifted closer to the displays. "It adapts not just to survive, but to understand, much like you, Marcus Drake." Before he could respond, the lab door slid open. Kira Vorthak strode in, her biometallic armor gleaming in Naira's starlight. "This ends now, Drake," she announced, her voice carrying the authority of her warrior lineage. "Your passive observation has wasted enough time." Marcus remained seated, keeping his voice calm. "And how many capture attempts have failed so far, Kira? How many times has force proved useless?" "Because we've been too cautious," she countered, activating her armor's combat systems. "The creature is too dangerous to be allowed free rein. The Academy Council has authorized full containment protocols." "Full containment," Naira's form pulsed with alarm. "That level of force could destabilize the entire Academy's power grid." Marcus stood slowly, his mind racing. "Kira, think about what you've seen. Every time we attack, it grows stronger. It's not just defending itself, it's trying to communicate." "Communication is no longer the objective," Kira's armor hummed with building energy. "Containment is all that matters now. Join us or stay out of our way." As she turned to leave, Marcus made a decision. "You're right about one thing," he called after her. "This does end now." He grabbed his tablet and hurried from the lab, Naira following close behind. The academy's corridors thrummed with power as teams of students prepared for their final assault. Marcus could feel the tension building, like a storm about to break. "What are you planning?" Naira asked as they rushed through the darkened halls. "Something incredibly risky," Marcus replied, accessing the Academy's central power grid through his tablet. "But if I'm right about the Luminox, it's our only chance to prevent disaster." They reached the Academy's main power distribution center, a vast chamber filled with pulsing energy conduits and humming transformers. Marcus quickly located the primary control panel and began making modifications. "The Luminox doesn't just follow these power lines," he explained as he worked. "It resonates with them. The ancient station where it lived, it wasn't just studying other species. It was teaching them, sharing knowledge through pure energy." Naira's light dimmed in understanding, and now it's trapped in an environment where everyone treats it as a threat. "Exactly." Marcus finished his modifications and stepped back. "So let's show it something different." Above them, the sounds of the final containment operation grew louder. Marcus activated his tablet, sending a new signal through the power grid. Unlike his previous attempts at communication, this one carried more than just an echo of the ancient station. It carried images, memories from the Academy's archives, stories of different species learning to understand each other, moments of connection across the gulf of space. "You're not trying to capture it," Naira realized. "You're trying to show it why we're here." The chamber's energy conduits pulsed with new patterns as Marcus's signal spread through the Academy. "The Academy wasn't built for containment," he said. "It was built for understanding, just like that ancient station, just like the Luminox itself." Suddenly, the air around them began to shimmer. The Luminox emerged from the nearest conduit, its form more solid than before. Its eyes fixed on Marcus with an intensity that made his breath catch. "Hello again," he said softly, keeping his hands visible and empty. "I think I finally understand what you've been trying to tell us." The creature moved closer, its colors shifting in response to his words. Behind it, more shimmers appeared in the air, not reflections, but memories. Images of the ancient station, of other beings studying and learning together. "You're not a specimen to be captured," Marcus continued. "You're a teacher, and we've been too busy trying to prove our superiority to learn what you have to share." The Luminox's form stabilized further, its colors becoming deeper, more vibrant. It extended one of its ethereal limbs toward Marcus's tablet, touching the screen gently. The device's display erupted with new information star charts, mathematical formulas, concepts that made Marcus's mind spin. Naira's light flared with excitement. "It's not just communicating, it's teaching." Before Marcus could respond, alarms blared throughout the Academy. The containment operation was beginning. They were out of time. The Luminox's form tensed, ready to flee, but Marcus held up his hand. "Wait," he said, his voice firm but gentle. "Let me show them, let me help them understand." For a moment, the chamber was perfectly still. Then the Luminox's eyes met his again, and Marcus felt something he couldn't explain, a connection that went beyond words or energy or understanding. A recognition of kindred spirits, both seeking to bridge the gaps between worlds. Now he just had to convince everyone else before their fear destroyed everything they could learn. The Academy's warning sirens filled the air as the containment teams converged on the power distribution center. Marcus could hear the heavy footsteps of Centaurian combat units and the distinctive hum of Vexarian energy weapons. The Luminox's form flickered anxiously, its colors shifting between deep purples and electric blues. "They're sealing off every level," Naira reported, her stellar form pulsing as she monitored the Academy's security feeds. "The Neuroths have created a psychic barrier around the entire sector." Marcus worked frantically at his tablet, trying to broadcast the Luminox's teachings through the Academy's communication network. "If they just look at this data, the mathematical principles alone could advance our understanding of quantum mechanics by decades." The chamber's massive doors slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Kira led a team of heavily armed students into the room, their weapons trained on the Luminox. Her biometallic armor had been upgraded with experimental containment technology, crackling with barely contained energy. "Step away from it, Drake," she ordered, her voice hard. "This is your final warning." The Luminox's form began to destabilize, preparing to phase through the nearest wall. But Marcus stood his ground, positioning himself between the creature and the assault team. "You need to see this first," he said, holding up his tablet. "It's not what we thought. It's been trying to teach us." "Teaching us how to be vulnerable," Kira countered. "How many of our defense systems has it already analyzed? How many weaknesses has it discovered?" Her armor's targeting systems locked onto the Luminox. "The Council's decision is final." Professor Zelthon's voice suddenly filled the chamber. "Containment protocols authorized. Execute immediately." The assault team moved with practiced precision. Vexarian energy nets deployed from multiple angles, while Neuroth psychics launched a coordinated mental assault. Kira's enhanced armor released a burst of quantum-locked particles designed to freeze the Luminox in a single-phase state. Marcus felt the air crackle with competing energies. The Luminox's form blazed with light as it absorbed and redirected the attacks, but something was wrong. The creature's usual grace had been replaced by desperate, almost panicked movements. "Stop," Marcus shouted, but his voice was lost in the chaos. "You're hurting it." The Luminox's form began to pulse erratically, its colors shifting to deep, dangerous reds. Energy readings spiked across Marcus's tablet, warning of critical instability. The creature wasn't just defending itself anymore, it was approaching a catastrophic overload. Naira's light flared in alarm. "The power grid, it's feeding back into the containment systems." Marcus saw it too. The Luminox's connection to the Academy's power network was turning against them. Every attempt to contain it only fed more energy into the overload. Warnings flashed across every screen as safety systems began to fail. "Kira," Marcus turned to the Centaurian warrior. "Look at these readings. If we don't stop now, the feedback loop will destroy half the Academy." But the assault continued. The Luminox's form was now a writhing mass of energy, its once beautiful patterns degrading into chaos. Marcus could feel the floor vibrating beneath his feet as power conduits began to rupture. In that moment, Marcus made a choice that would either save them all or end his academic career forever. He stepped forward, directly into the line of fire, and reached out toward the Luminox. "Trust me," he said softly, not sure if the creature could even hear him through the storm of energies. "Like I trusted you." The Luminox's eyes found his, recognition flickering through the chaos. Marcus held up his tablet, still displaying the teachings it had shared. "You came here to show us something beautiful," he continued. "Don't let fear turn it into destruction." Time seemed to slow. The assault team's weapons hummed at full power. Kira's armor blazed with contained energy. The Luminox's form pulsed between stability and chaos. Then, in a moment that would be debated in academy halls for years to come, the creature made its choice. Instead of releasing its gathered energy in a devastating blast, it reached out with one ethereal limb and touched Marcus's tablet once more. The device's screen erupted with light, but this time the energy spread beyond it. Holographic displays sprang to life throughout the chamber, filling the air with incredible images. Star maps showing hidden spatial corridors, mathematical formulas that described the very fabric of space-time, and most importantly, the history of the Luminox's people, ancient teachers who had seeded the galaxy with knowledge before vanishing into legend. The assault team's weapons lowered slowly as understanding dawned. This wasn't a creature to be contained. It was a living library, a keeper of knowledge that had chosen the Academy as its new home. Kira's armor powered down as she stared at the displays. "All this time," she whispered, "we never even asked what it was trying to tell us." The Luminox's form stabilized, its colors returning to their natural, shifting beauty. It moved closer to Marcus, and in its eyes he saw not just intelligence but gratitude. Sometimes the bravest thing wasn't standing against an enemy, but standing up for understanding. The Academy's Grand Assembly Hall had never been so full. Students and faculty from every known species packed the tiered seating, their attention fixed on the presentation unfolding before them. At the center of the stage, Marcus stood beside the Luminox, whose form cast shifting patterns of light across the ancient walls. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation in the Power Distribution Center. In that time, everything had changed. The Luminox was no longer a specimen to be studied or a creature to be contained. It was the Academy's most valuable teacher. The spatial corridors mapped in these archives, Marcus explained, gesturing to the holographic display, could revolutionize interstellar travel. But more importantly, they show us how much we still have to learn from each other. The Luminox moved with fluid grace, adding its own insights to the presentation. Its method of communication had evolved, combining energy patterns with holographic imagery to share complex concepts. The audience watched in fascination as it demonstrated principles of physics that unified competing theories which had puzzled scientists for generations. Professor Zelthon stood from his seat, his plasma skin rippling with excitement. "And you believe there are more teachers like the Luminox out there?" Marcus nodded, bringing up a new star chart. The ancient station wasn't just a single outpost. It was part of a network, a system of learning centers established across the galaxy. Some might still be active, waiting for students ready to understand rather than conquer. Kira, who had become one of the Luminox's most dedicated students, stepped forward. Her biometallic armor had been modified, no longer optimized for combat, but for receiving and processing the complex energy patterns that carried the creature's teachings. "We've already begun adapting our technology," she announced. "The principles the Luminox has shared are helping us transform weapons into tools for exploration and understanding." The creature's colors shifted to warm golds and deep blues, its way of expressing approval. It moved to the center of the stage, and the hall fell silent in anticipation. Above them, a new hologram took shape, a vast map of the galaxy with points of light marking the locations of other ancient learning stations. "An invitation," Naira translated, her stellar form pulsing with excitement. "It wants to help us find the others." Marcus smiled, remembering that first moment of connection in the library. "But this time, we go not as hunters or conquerors," he said. "We go as students ready to learn." The assembly hall erupted in discussion as the implications became clear. This wasn't just about one creature or one academy. It was about reshaping how different species could interact and learn from each other. Later that evening, Marcus stood at one of the academy's observation windows, watching the 3 moons rise. The Luminox approached silently, its reflection joining his in the transparent barrier. "Thank you," Marcus said softly, "not just for the knowledge, but for trusting us enough to share it." The creature's form shifted, creating patterns that Marcus had learned to recognize as amusement. It had taken time, but they had developed their own way of communicating, not through force or technological interface, but through patient understanding. Naira drifted over to join them, her stellar light harmonizing with the Luminox's glow. "The first expedition team leaves tomorrow," she said. "The council has approved the search for other stations." Marcus nodded, watching as students of different species gathered in the courtyard below, sharing what they had learned. The academy had been transformed. Where once there had been competition and hierarchy, now there was collaboration and mutual respect. "You know what amazes me most," he said, turning to his companions. "We thought we were testing our ability to contain and control, but we were the ones being tested. The Luminox was waiting for someone to prove that this galaxy was ready for what its people had left behind."